Oblivion is back, and so is that incredible sense of roleplay. One of the best things about Oblivion is that you can actually tailor your class to a fairly great extent through its so-called major skills, having a major impact on your gameplay for the majority of your playthrough. While Skyrim's level system is a lot more open in that sense, in that every skill levels at the same speed and that you begin at the same level no matter what class you choose, I find Oblivion's system particularly immersive because choosing your background as an in-game adult no less just makes sense. You don't know why you ended up in the Imperial prison, but you know it's not your first day alive. Choosing your skills can be a tough act though, as not every skill is as important nor as vital to begin powerful in. In this video then, we are ranking every Oblivion skill from worst to best, taking into account their applicability in the game and the value that picking them as a major skill actually gives. Remember to like the video and leave a comment with your thoughts down below. And did you know that only 0.5% of my viewers are actually subscribed to the channel? If you enjoy my content and want to support the channel, subscribing is really just about the kindest thing you can do, and truly means a lot. At number 21 and the worst skill in all of Oblivion, we have Speechcraft. While Speechcraft is in theory an awesome skill for role-playing reasons, it hasn't managed to persuade me. That's because Speechcraft first and foremost provides you with bonuses related to the speech wheel and relationship system, a system I love by the way, but which is so simple to figure out anyway that an entire skill dedicated to making it slightly easier than it already is just a massive waste of breath. Remember that things like merchant prices are not at all impacted by your Speechcraft, only by how much you've managed to make the other person like you and how much you've managed to haggle, which means that in many respects outside of perhaps roleplay, Speechcraft is useless. Number 20 sadly goes to Athletics. Athletics is a skill that covers the speed at which your character runs, sprints, and swims at, while also governing regeneration and usage of fatigue. And so, while it's all well and good to be a master in athletics, choosing it as a major skill is basically a waste. Reason why is that athletics is something you train in passively, basically no matter what you do, since you're always either walking, running, sprinting, swimming, or jumping anyway, unless you are of course on horseback. Having faster fatigue regeneration while running or even not spending it at all at later levels is great, no doubt, but it makes a tiny difference compared to other skills. Athletics then is a hard no-go. With number 19 comes Alchemy. Much like Speechcraft, the alchemy part of Oblivion is great, but dedicating a full skill to it, unless you go roleplay or you're completely invested in alchemy from the very beginning, is not a good use of a major skill. That's because making use of the alchemy system at a regular basis will net you relatively quick levels anyway, and you can make a bunch of different stuff from the start anyway to make that happen. Sure, it's nice to have a good alchemic level from the get-go, allowing you to recognize more properties in ingredients and perhaps make a surplus potion here and there. Indeed, if you want to completely break the game, focusing alchemy and becoming a master will allow you to craft potions from one simple ingredient, allowing you to become extremely rich extremely fast from selling said potions, meaning that you can essentially indeed pretty much make gold. But that's neither that immersive nor really that much fun, and since alchemy can be used fairly effectively from the start anyway, it lands at spot number 19. At number 18 we find Light Armor. Now light armor is definitely a useful skill to have if you indeed prance around in it, as it helps you maintain your light equipment better and at the end awards you even more protection. However, much like the previous levels, the light armor skill is naturally leveled as you get hit by enemies, and honestly, the most important of the light armor ranks anyway is the apprentice level, where the armor degrades at a normal rate. Light armor levels will make those armors more useful then, which is always great, but it's just not as crucial to pick as a major skill as the more important ones on this list, and therefore lands at spot 18. At spot number 17 comes Acrobatics, and let me tell you why. Acrobatics in Oblivion governs things like fall damage, which you actually may take a ton of at earlier levels and at not that far distances either. It allows you to jump higher, which can be useful if you are a jumper, I guess, but importantly, and which is legitimately fun, is that acrobatics beginning at the apprentice level actually allows you to use a new animation, namely dodging, which can be useful in combat, but I mostly love it for the completely new vibe your characters gets with it. Acrobatics also allows you to jump over the surface of water at the expert level. Thing is though, acrobatics can be leveled fairly consistently if you wanted to, even outside of the major skill, as jumping in Oblivion is kind of a mainstay. And because unless you're reckless, acrobatics won't necessarily mean all that much to you, but because it hides some pretty cool features, it lands on spot number 17. Spot 16 now goes to Mercantile. The mercantile game in Oblivion is great, and I find that if you roleplay and play the game like a regular human being, amassing wealth actually takes a bit of time. Selling items you find and haggling for the price with the merchant is an important part of the game, and Mercantile will definitely help you with that. In fact, it may both award you better prices, better stock with merchants, and even allow you to invest in merchant shops so they can purchase your items at a higher upper price. In many ways then, Mercantile is a great skill. However, I don't think it's the most useful as a major skill, again outside of roleplay, as haggling, buying and selling will naturally level this skill at a relatively quick pace anyway. Plus, as long as you make it to the apprentice level, your item's price won't be reduced if their condition is degraded, which is arguably the most important of the levels here, even though the expert and master levels of better prices and stock overall is awesome. At spot number 15 awaits Armorer. Armor affects your ability to effectively repair armor, the doi, but it actually allows you, starting with the apprentice level, to repair magical armor, and later for you to actually improve your armor and even make your repair hammers unbreakable. It's a great skill in multiple ways then, and governs an aspect of the game I really like, but choosing it as a major skill, it's certainly great to be able to more reliably repair stuff and indeed repair whatever you want. But you can in fact get by without having armor as your major skill, at least if you're fairly good with looking for repair hammers in various barrels and chests across the game. As such, it is a useful and immersive skill and might even save you a ton of money by the end of it, but is not a crucial skill to choose as your major. Number 14, and the security skill is no longer safe. The lockpicking system in Oblivion is legendary and so much better than in Skyrim, yeah I said it, and having a high security skill is definitely great, since the system becomes much more lenient when you fail to pick a lock past another one. However, most of the chests in the early to mid game will be a mix of very easy, or medium difficulty chests anyway, and having a bit of patience goes a long way when cracking these chests, so I don't find security to be the absolutely most useful skill, even though it's decently useful and great for roleplay. The fact that a certain magic skill also completely invalidates lockpicking at a certain level also makes security less useful if you've picked that one. As such, security lands at spot 14. At lucky number 13, and we're suddenly over-encumbered with heavy armor. Now you might be asking yourself why heavy armor lands this much higher than light armor despite basically doing the same thing for each armor type. But the reason is simple. They feature basically identical rank sets, but because of this, the result is actually different. Light armor, for example, already weighs much less than heavy armor, so while being an expert of light armor cuts its weight, cutting the weight of heavy armor as an expert, or indeed cutting it fully as a master, means such a great deal for your inventory space. Inventory space is limited in Oblivion, you see, and I can't be the only one who finds it a pain to balance being a heavy warrior and having space for all the loot you find across the world. Heavy armor then is a perfectly decent skill to make use of, and is usually a mainstay of my characters when going close quarter combat anyway. Number 12, and we have to talk about block. Block is a genuinely great skill if you are using a shield or otherwise running into battle nose first. Having a high block skill cuts the fatigue you're using when blocking incoming attacks, stops your equipment from degrading when blocking, and at expert level allows you to learn the amazing ability of Shield Bash, which, much like acrobatics, actually teaches you a completely new skill in this game, which is always welcome. However, if you happen to be a warrior, the apprentice level is definitely the most important skill to learn, namely to stop degradation caused by blocking. Constantly fighting will see you blocking a bunch as well, and so you're kind of naturally training this skill anyway, which, let's face it, doesn't give that much gain in that crucial journeyman rank between level 50 and 74, which means you'll reach the important apprentice level fairly soon anyway. As such, while blocking is a great skill to have, it's typically not crucial. Number 11, and we're going toe-to-toe with hand-to-hand. Hand-to-hand means fighting with your bare knuckles, and in Oblivion, hand-to-hand combat actually nets you some very useful skills, namely the ability to consistently make your opponents recoil or even drop their weapons entirely when hitting them at the journeyman level. It is a useful skill then if you're going for the hand-to-hand way of life, but personally, I basically never do that. As such, what I want to convey here is that hand-to-hand is actually a great skill on its own, but because I basically never use it myself, and because there are so many awesome weapons in Oblivion outside of what the 9 Divines gave you, hand-to-hand cannot go higher than this, which is admittedly fairly high already. Coming in at number 10 and more than halfway down the list now, and to be blunt, we have to talk about the blunt skill. Blunt weapons in Oblivion are great and massive damage dealers, making them great weapons for close quarter fighters and if you are roleplaying as a tank or a barbarian style warrior. Featuring axes, maces, and hammers, it's got all of that good stuff. Having a blunt skill will therefore net you even more damage dealing potential, while also granting you a shield effect and making your heavy attacks even more powerful with virtually each rank. I think it's a great skill overall, but it's one of those skills that of course are only useful if you're using blunt weapons, and since they're typically fairly heavy and a bit less nimble than the alternatives, I tend to very rarely use them myself. As such, this skill obviously relies on your type of character. But for the characters that use blunt weapons, you kinda have to have this one. At number 9, we have Illusion, the first magic type skill on this list actually. The reason why it's the least useful of the magic types, however, is because it mainly governs the likes of perception, charm, silence, and light. It's extremely useful if you don't want to bother with the speechcraft system or if you want to make yourself invisible to enemies, but of course your ability here scales with your actual level and rank. It's a fun skill to use, especially if you wish to roleplay as an evil mage lurking in the darkness or something, but of course, magic skills can be leveled by consistently casting them anyway if you want to go that route. But choosing Illusion does net you an illusion spell to start with, and is therefore relatively useful right away. Number 8 is another magic skill, namely Mysticism. Mysticism is great for things like detecting enemies before actually detecting them, dispelling or reflecting magic in different ways, and as such, if you're going up against a bunch of mages or supernatural fire-casting Atronachs, Mysticism may give you the upper hand in literally dispelling their power. However, I find that Mysticism is not as cool nor as immediately useful as the later magic skills on this list because of the spell types it governs, especially if you're not an overall mage. Of course, once you're able to make your own spells and perhaps create something that literally reflects damage dealt to you back on your enemy, Mysticism becomes quite the crazy skill, but for the most part, it's just not my main cup of tea. Number 7, and we're looking at Alteration. Now, Alteration is basically Mysticism, but alter it to make it cool, because Alteration governs spells that allow you to breathe under or walk on water, lets you magically open locks, reduce inventory encumbrance, and even shield yourself from physical and magical damage. In other words, Alteration does partly what Mysticism does, but adds in a bunch of useful real-world abilities, allowing you to do things that otherwise just aren't possible. I also love the idea of casting a protective barrier that shields you from damage, and as such, Alteration is both useful and awesome, and lands at spot number 7. The major skill of Blade comes in at number 6. While of course only useful if you're using weapons with a blade, that is after all quite a lot of the weapons available in Oblivion, and if I do say so myself, possibly the coolest ones as well. But the blade skill is particularly useful because its levels allow your power attacks to make enemies weaker to your normal blade attacks, and can even apply a bleeding effect to them at expert level or higher, meaning that you'll deal higher action damage and passive damage in combat. Not only is Blade useful for everything from short swords to long swords and even claymores, but it also governs daggers, which is going to be very useful for another skill we'll come back to soon. In other words, Blade is not just a useful major skill for its own weapon types, of which there are a lot, but also for another skill, making it one of the 6th most useful skills in all of Oblivion. At number 5, and things are definitely starting to heal up now, with Restoration. Restoration is one of the most useful skills in Oblivion as it governs your ability to heal both yourself and others. In fact, it is an incredibly useful skill if you want to stay alive or regain things like fatigue, and if you wish to keep your allies alive. As such, it definitely deserves spot number 5, but because Restoration is so useful, you actually begin the game with a healing spell already. This allows you to train the skill from the get-go, and is possibly one of the game's most natural spells to use, and you can just constantly cast heal to train yourself. Remember also that while the goal in Oblivion is definitely not to die, it's first and foremost to defeat your enemies, and Restoration is only truly useful if you actually allow yourself to get hit in the first place. In this way, Restoration becomes much more of a reactive skill than an active one, extremely useful in a variety of situations for sure, but you can technically alleviate low Restoration with potions, and by simply not getting hit at all. Get good, as they say. Speaking of allies, at spot number 4 appears Conjuration. Conjuration is one of the absolutely coolest skills in Oblivion, because it allows you to literally create allies in the heat of battle, summoning animals or creatures to fight for you. And Conjuration even lets you summon armor and weapons. In this way, Conjuration is as awesome as it is deadly, but it's certainly also mostly meant for mages or evil type characters, as conjuring Daedric monsters isn't particularly noble knightly. It must be remembered that Conjuration magic also tends to demand quite a lot of magicka, and if you don't have more magicka after use, you might need to rely on a secondary skill to get the job done. Either way, as cool and potentially powerful as it is, Conjuration earns spot number 4. We are in the top 3 now in the fight for the best skills in all of Oblivion, and for the bronze medal at spot number 3 comes Destruction. Destruction is your typical and crucial spell if you're going for a mage build, and is generally extremely powerful. Because Oblivion allows you to make your own spells at 1.2, your destruction spells can become so powerful that they hit several targets at once and deal an enormous amount of damage, allowing you to truly live out that wizard or witch fantasy. Useful for both roleplay as mages, spell swords, or just any character in general really, Destruction earns the spot for 3rd best skill in the entire game. The silver medal and spot number 2 for the 2nd best skill in Oblivion comes Marksman. Marksman governs your ability to use a bow, and I'm willing to bet most characters made in Oblivion use Marksman as a major skill. Fighting from a distance is just a cool thing in general, and bows allow you to keep that distance for as long as possible. Choosing this as a major skill will let you bypass the reality of losing fatigue as you draw your bow, and at the crucial journeyman level, you may even focus your vision by zooming in, opening up for more gameplay opportunities. At higher levels, you can even paralyze your targets with arrows, making long-distance combat even more viable. Marksman also works great alongside the remaining skill on this list. And so, for the gold medal and spot number 1 for the best skill in all of Oblivion, I give you Sneak. Sneak is just about the most useful skill in the entire game, as playing as that stealth archer is just so OP. Getting multiplier damage while shooting while sneaking always feels amazing, and if you couple Sneak with the blade skill as we mentioned earlier, you'll do even more damage in Sneak, particularly while using daggers. You might think that sneaking is mostly for rogue or evil type characters, but it doesn't have to be, as hitting things from afar or stealing the odd item without being seen is something I'm sure everybody does in this game anyway. Sneak is just so incredibly versatile, and beginning the game as an apprentice, which makes those sneak attacks deadlier, is very useful, but later on, a high sneak rank will make you both a lot harder to detect by enemies and will also ignore your opponent's armor completely, turning you into a 1 body type 1 or body type 2 army. As such, Sneak deserves the top spot and gold medal as the best major skill in the entire game, sneakily so. Of course, when it comes down to it, how useful, good, or cool a skill is completely dependent on how and even if you use it. You might have playthroughs that completely ignore some while fully relying on others, but overall, in terms of making them your majors, these are my thoughts on what you should be keeping in mind. Now it's your turn to tell me your opinions and whether you agree with mine. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and because only 0.5% of watchers are subscribed, it would mean the world if you click that subscribe button to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!